Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 87 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and I'm joined alongside Joe Meade. And Joe, we've got a little bit of a Big Ten basketball catch up here. We had some rivalry games this weekend. We had some Illinois team play a non-conference game against Duke, and you look up at the calendar, and we're just a week or so away from March. So, Joe, obviously, before we get into it, any big takeaways from the weekend of basketball as a whole?
Yeah, I think both nationally and particularly in the conference we cover, it's kind of fascinating. A lot of these conference races, aside from the SEC, perhaps, and really not even the SEC because that seeding is going to get all messed up in these last few weeks. Uh, there's no real consistent front runner in most of these conferences, particularly the Big Ten. Michigan State led for most of January. Then it looked like Purdue was back in the driver's seat. Then Michigan was in the driver's seat. Now you thought for 12 hours, hey, Wisconsin with that light schedule, they're in the driver's seat. Now it's back to Michigan and Michigan State with the advantage to Michigan State right now. So uh, that was my main takeaway. And a lot of teams that were on the bubble, and we'll cover them today, uh, probably put themselves on the right side recently, and a lot of teams that look pretty safe, Ohio State, now have played themselves outside the bubble. So a lot to cover here.
Yeah, so Joe, let's start off, unfortunately, with your Michigan Wolverines on Friday. The Spartans go on the road to the Crisler Center in front of a pretty good crowd, and it was Michigan that led at the half, 38 to 34. But the Spartans outscore the Wolverines by 17 in the second half. Michigan State gets to 22 and 5, and for now, they have flipped the title race in their favor. There is another game between these two teams at the Breslin Center on the final day of the season. But Joe, this is not the Michigan State team that we've seen really. They started to play better with nice wins against Illinois and Purdue, but this was their most complete performance after falling behind early, and certainly probably their most impressive win of the season.
Yeah, and what it comes down to, what impressed me about Michigan State being there in person, timely basketball. What do I mean by that? The second half, they were only down four going into the break. They really could have been down 10, and that's to their credit. They stopped Michigan's runs of momentum when they had to. They got to the free throw line in the first half when they had to, a place, as we've covered in multiple episodes. And if you're new here, Michigan State shoots free throws exceptionally well. I think they're still one of the top four teams in the country, definitely top two in the conference in doing so. So they don't miss on their free chances. And going into the second half, Sean, you saw a lot of disturbing trends if you were a Michigan fan, right? Michigan State was getting a ridiculous amount of offensive rebounds, an area you thought Michigan would do pretty well in based on their height advantage. And Michigan State, a team that, as most of their fans would complain, and probably will still complain, they're not a great three-point shooting team. They shot the lights out in the second half, whether it was Jace Richardson, who had over 20 points. Trey Holloman probably had his best game as a Spartan, at least his best game as a Spartan this season against a competitive opponent. And they kind of rode those two. And all the other guys, Cohen Carr with timely rebounds, every guy who entered the game for Michigan State had a very clear presence, whether it was spacing the floor for a Frankie Fiddler. Jaden Akins kind of didn't even have to be Robin. He could have been like Batgirl, and I don't see that in a bad way. I think he just kind of knew this was a Trey Holloman and a Jace Richardson game. He kind of facilitated for them. He moved the ball well. And defensively, Michigan played right into their hands. Danny Wolf kind of ran the offense, and Michigan State clearly wanted that. They doubled him. They wasted a lot of shot clock. They didn't take a lot of good shots. They didn't hit their open shots either, and they really made Roddy Gale and Trey Donaldson, Michigan's guard play, look really silly at times. And you have to think that, in a way, Tom Izzo out-prepared Michigan. I'm not saying the effort necessarily, but he's been. There's a reason Tom Izzo is the winningest coach in this conference's history. He knows how to beat teams. He's seen this time and time again, and he definitely out-strategized Dusty May, who did get that extension, which part of my conspiracy is whenever you announce that, usually nothing good happens after that. And unfortunately, it was proven correct. But really impressive from the Spartans. They made Michigan play one of their worst games they played probably since that Purdue game in Mackey Arena, Sean. And I don't want to take anything away from the Spartans. They played a masterful game. It was a well-coached game. And anytime they fell behind, anytime Michigan went on a run, Michigan State would respond with like a 7-0 run or a run where they had a more than three basket advantage for a 2 or 3 minute stretch. So good on the Spartans, good in transition, and this was probably a typical Michigan State victory in this conference.
The the guards for Michigan just really did not show up. If Trey Donaldson 1 for 5, Namari Burnett did have a nice game, 5 for 8 for 12 points. But you have Trey Donaldson who's 1 for 5, Reuben Jones who's 1 for 3, and Roddy Gale who's 1 for 6. I mean, you can put that together. That's 3 for 14 from the field. That is a lot of misses, and Michigan probably just needs one of them to play well to win this game. They don't. Ultimately, Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf have pretty nice games. And then on the other side, Joe, it's all of the points are from guards for Michigan State. You got 21 from Jace, 10 from Fears, 11 from Akins, and 18 from Holloman on the bench. Just, not very many points from the Michigan State forwards. So, typically in close games, guard play does beat forward play. Not every time, but that certainly was the case here. Michigan State made some threes, like you mentioned. They hadn't really done that. And they kind of flipped the script on this conference race right now. I think Michigan was slight favorites in this one, and I don't know if Michigan's been all that inconsistent. When they haven't played well, they've sort of rescued some games, but Michigan State has. I mean, these last 3 wins are as good as they've looked all year, I think, after they took their punches in Los Angeles, and then they lost at home to Indiana. But since then, they seem to be playing a better brand of basketball. They are what they are. Their flaws are their flaws. You're not fixing those at this point in the year, and it looks like they've found that winning formula again. All right, Joe, let's turn the calendar to Saturday. We had a couple important games here. First, let's talk about what happened at the Kohl Center. Wisconsin looks like they're rolling Oregon. They've got a 12-point lead at halftime. I think it got up to 17 at some point in the second half, but Oregon storms back. Wisconsin does not foul up 3. Jackson Shellstad ties the game. It goes to overtime, and the Ducks pull off a unbelievable comeback and win at the Kohl Center. So Wisconsin thought they had a chance to win the title. Not so fast. Oregon had been reeling, Joe. A couple of their quad 1 wins had turned into quad 2, but they pick up a really important road win here, and just like that, they're 20-8 on the season. There's not much more that one game could do to turn around a season.
Yeah, Sean, and we're going to focus on Wisconsin just for this 20-second dissertation here. With their remaining schedule, I understood they went to the Breslin, but other than that, they were playing teams in the bottom half of the conference: Washington at home, at Minnesota, and Penn State at home. They really had a chance to win outright or at least get a share, and I think that's probably gone, barring a major disaster from one of the Mid-States teams. So, or both of the Mid-States teams, I should say. So, you look at this game, you think John Taji 22, John Blackwell 6 points, but here's the problem. Wisconsin did not shoot the 3 as well as I would have liked them to. 0 of 6 from Blackwell, 0 of 2 from Crowell. Did get some production off the bench, Sean, but this kind of looked like a Wisconsin of old, where they went through these scoring droughts, particularly when Oregon made their mad comeback in the last 10 minutes. And for a second there, you thought you were watching Wisconsin's of past years, because this year they've done a really good job addressing that. I do want to highlight Nate Biddle for Oregon. I thought he was probably their best player. And then Jadrian Tracy off the bench, and Kwame Evans Jr., who was, as it's been noted, Sean, he was one of the better recruits in the 2023 cycle. And, you're kind of seeing why. You saw it in flashes at Michigan State, and now you're seeing it in flashes at Wisconsin. I think if Oregon gets better bench play like this, I don't think they'll be going on skids the way they've been on. And, perhaps they finish the season a lot stronger and get back to a seed, because they've been as high as like 3-4 seeds in a lot of bracketology starting in January, and then they kind of dipped to like 7-8s in a lot. So I think the truth lies in the middle. Maybe they're a 6 seed, 5 if they really get on a roll in the Big Ten tournament. But I think this was definitely Oregon's most important game of the year, and perhaps a turning point for the Ducks, who really reeled of late.
Yeah, they were second in quad 1 wins in the entire country for a while. They got to 7. I think 2 of those did turn into quad 2. But then they get this one. I think they're at 6 or 7 right now. I'd have to check and see where all the numbers lie next time I do bracketology. But they were a team that was going to be an overseeded team because of how good they played in the non-conference. But it seems like there might be something left for the Ducks. They got 3 games left. They host USC, they host Indiana, and they go to Washington. That's not a lot of travel, especially for them in the Big Ten. So maybe you think that they can get 2, perhaps even all 3 of those and get into that 5 and 6 seed range again, because those the wins do not matter when they happen. They still won all those good games in November. They beat Texas A&M, who's a top 4 protected seed. They beat Alabama, who's on the number 1 line. The San Diego State win hasn't really aged all that great, but they're proving that they can still do it at a little bit of a high level here. They were able to beat Iowa on the road also, so this is a 2-0 road trip for Oregon. Not probably the first time they've done that, but you got to give credit to Oregon. But Joe, this was Wisconsin's game. They totally gave it away. They didn't shoot the 3 well. They only got to the foul line 6 times. They turned it over 17 times. But this is a little bit of a wake-up call here. You're still 21-6. You're still 11-5. You're still in a good spot, and there's winnable games ahead. But there's no reason why this game should have been particularly close at the end. If you're up double digits at home, you should probably win by double digits. So potentially something to look out for Wisconsin. These games probably don't mean a whole lot down the stretch. They're going to have a good seed regardless. The Big Ten tournament, again, probably doesn't matter. They have enough good wins already, but potentially some things to be worried about from this one.
Yeah, and in terms of a conference crown, I think your chances are not slim. I mean, not none, but definitely slim. And the only way I see it is if you win out, including that game at the Breslin. But I think the bigger problems for Wisconsin are these offensive. I'm not going to overreact to one game, but if this repeats itself in these last 4 games they have, or into the Big Ten tournament, I think they're a team that could potentially be on upset alert. Not necessarily the first round, but definitely in the second round, because I do think they'll still be a 4 seed or protected seed.
This Wisconsin team looked like the team last year that lost to James Madison in the first round. That's what happened. But again, Wisconsin's been great. At probably 2 separate times, Wisconsin's been playing really good this year, and there's enough time to figure it out before the end. All right, Joe, we're going to go to New York City, Madison Square Garden, for this interesting non-conference clash between Duke and Illinois. John Shire and Duke were the ones who put this together, and it looks like they want to do it in the future to get a NCAA tournament-type situation, neutral court, a lot of fans. This looked a lot more like a bye game than an NCAA tournament game. Duke 110 and Illinois 67. It was pretty clear early on, Joe, that Illinois couldn't really hang with Duke, but they did not let up. This margin murders all of the good numbers that Illinois has had this year. Duke is really good, definitely one of the 2 best teams in the country, but Illinois got thoroughly outplayed by a better opponent.
Yeah, Sean, and this is the real disturbing trend, and I'm not going to go on a tangent, I swear here. If it weren't for Ohio State's performance against Northwestern, this would probably be the worst performance of the week. It's not losing to Duke. It's not even getting crushed by Duke. It's the fact that they're continuing to shoot threes at a ridiculous rate when it's not. It's burned them. It burned them at Wisconsin. It burned them at home against Michigan State. A game, by the way, they were favored. And think about this. A week ago, they were favored at home against Michigan State. And they've lost 3 in a row, Sean. 2 of 26 from 3. That's ridiculous. That's less than 10%. In fact, that's less than 8%. It's 7.7% from 3. And the fact they're kind of free-range shooting this, people called out Huma Kraus for this. People called out Ivisic. People even called out Yakishotis for this. This is a team problem. To pinpoint one guy to blame is pretty pathetic. I think Brad Underwood, for as good as he's done in Illinois, and I commend him for the job he's done, this is one of his worst coaching jobs by letting them just continue to jack threes. Because we saw them at home against UCLA not do this, shorten their lineup, and they played really well. And the fact they've regressed even worse so than they did in January is a really disturbing trend. And, aside from their game at home against Iowa, which they really can't lose, they finished the year at Crisler and then home against Purdue. So, the road definitely is not getting too much easier. In fact, it's probably getting a tad harder. And there's a real chance Illinois can end the regular season with more than 12 to 13 losses.
Yeah, if they were to drop that Iowa one, Joe, they'd be in trouble. Probably near the bubble at that point, and then you wouldn't like their chances in the final 2 if they drop that one to Iowa. But again, Duke is an incredible basketball team. I think it's not a good matchup for Illinois. Duke's interior defense is by far the best in the country. Illinois, I think they got mostly open shots. They just needed to abandon it. I see it with my team all the time. They don't make threes. They just pound it inside until it works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. But again, Humrickhouse is not providing much right now on either end of the floor. Ivisic really is only a threat on the pick and pop on offense. And your other three guards were actually all right. Kasparis, Trey White, and Boswell. They had to work incredibly hard against Duke's guards. But again, not much off the bench. And you're not getting anything from your forward line. Joe, had they lost by 20 here, I think we'd say, all right, Duke is just the better team. But to lose a game by this much, a lot of points, 43 points, that should never happen. And at this point in the year, with so many games in the data, it's really hard to move your numbers a ton. Because there's just, we're getting into near game 30. One data point is not going to change it much. Well, a 43-point loss will. So, again, they're not looking great now. We're probably going to see them around the 8 or 9 seed line. And in the next edition of Bracketology, we'll pull up the matrix later. It's been 4 or 5 days since I've done a projection, but this is, I think, a blowout was sort of coming, but this margin was pretty insane, and Illinois' got a lot of work to do to turn this thing around, Joe. It's seeming like the 22-23 team that was pretty good early on, really wasn't playing good basketball down the stretch, ended up making the tournament. They were 9 seed maybe, and lost in the first round against Arkansas. But yeah, it seems like that's this team and that team aren't all that different. And that's not a good thing for Illinois fans because they wanted that season to end. All right, Joe, we'll turn the page to Sunday. We'll start in Bloomington, Indiana. Purdue and Indiana, game 1 went to the Boilers and a really close one at Mackey. And on the 40th anniversary of the Bob Knight chair throw, Indiana puts together their best second half of the year. It ends up dismantling Purdue. Indiana 73, Purdue 58. Joe, it didn't look like this was going to happen early in the game, but the Hoosiers put up their best defensive performance in the Mike Woodson era, and their season has a chance.
This was truly a tale of two halves, Sean. You looked at the way Purdue ended the last 6 minutes of the first half, down 12. And to be honest, Sean, I'm not a big believer in Indiana. I think they're a talented team, like we've said, but to fall down 12 at home after a week layoff, especially where that week layoff ended on a really sour note, losing to a crappy road team in UCLA by all metrics. To have that kind of second half, to start the second half with a 28-3 run. Say what you want about Mike Woodson. We made a whole video ripping him, which was a pretty highly viewed and listened to on both YouTube and Spotify. Wow. That was quite spectacular for the Hoosiers. That's probably the best they've looked in 2 years, I want to say, against a team that's really good. And just the combo of guys doing it. Trey Galloway contributing, Umar Ballo, Malik Renew. I can't even, Luke Goody hitting shots. This is probably what we envisioned Indiana was going to be at the beginning of the year. I'm not going to say it's finally clicking now because I don't know if that's sustainable, to be quite
that
honest
half is
with
not.
you.
Purdue finished the second half at .55 points per possession, and they actually made some shots down the stretch. They were at 0.3 points per possession, 20 possessions into the half. Like that, again. But I agree with the script. Indiana fell behind double digits. We've seen that before at home. They usually have kind of a pretty spirited comeback to make it a game late, and then they've come up short. It's happened Michigan, Maryland, and UCLA. You had a chance to win. Shots go in for the other team. They don't go in for you. They didn't leave any doubt here. They took a page out of Ryan Day's book, and they took it to Purdue. This is the best defensive performance against a power conference team. You have to go back 4 years. They did hold Jackson State to 35 points in 2021. And that is the last time that they've held a team to this low of points per possession. But, Joe, the effort was there. The crowd was there. There's a little incident early that I want to get your thoughts on because we've seen some other ones refereed a little bit differently. But, Indiana at least has a chance now. They needed this game. Had they lost this game, the at-large bid was probably out of reach, but with who they've got up next, they've got Penn State, Washington, Oregon, and Ohio State. I mean, the way Indiana is playing now, they were so close. They're playing pretty solid games against good teams and just coming up short. They finally break through here. The 15-point win helps the numbers. They're probably going to get into the top 50 in the net when it resets tonight. But, Joe, they needed this one badly, and sort of a once-in-a-lifetime sort of fluke defensive performance gets them across the line here, and more than across the line. They outscored Purdue 48-21 in the second half. They didn't make a ton of threes. They're pretty efficient from two-point land, but that's not anything new for them. But I've never really seen a game flip that much from the first half to the second.
No, and particularly with this team. I mean, commenting on that incident earlier with First and Leal, that was ridiculous. Like, I understand not wanting to eject either player to enforce nothing there and kind of let it simmer throughout the first half. I'm more shocked a Pier 6 brawl didn't break out than anything, to be quite fair, Sean. That's what kept me tuned in the first half, because not knowing Indiana was going to do what they did in the second half, I kind of just wanted to see a brawl at that stage because it was really boring basketball. And the fact that was allowed to continue, it's kind of... I think each fan base has had a particular moment that they've called out in their season with Big Ten officials. That was probably the most egregious, and I think both fan bases would agree.
And for those who didn't watch, Leal was boxing out Caleb First on a Purdue shot. It did not go in. First does reach over the back and foul and sort of take Leal down to the ground. And they get a little tangled up down there, and when Leal tries to get up to run away, Caleb First does stick his leg out to trip him. And Leal, trying to find his stance, does connect with First's groin area with his foot. So, again, we have seen less called flagrant twos this year, and Purdue fans were quick to point that out. That doesn't make that the right call, though. I mean, we talk about Jalen Leach against Michigan, and there's another one that happened as well. Ohio State.
Well, you see like a Dickinson against Duke.
And like First could have got ejected too. Go back to the Grayson Allen rule with Duke. I mean, you can't deliberately trip someone either. They both could have gone. One of them could have gone. But I was pretty shocked. They called nothing. Now, the announcers did say they called a foul on the floor. That was wrong. They did not. They just stopped it because they saw a little dust up. But interesting for Big Ten officials. Again, they can't seem to get out of their own way. We had another game that was heavily influenced by the officials in the Big 12 last night, Arizona and BYU. Wildcats fans not too happy about what happened there, but I don't really think it would have changed the game. I mean, Leal did make some nice plays, but if you're taking the fourth or fifth best player off the floor, I don't know if anything's different. I mean, Leal did a pretty good job against Braden Smith. It was probably his worst game of the year, but I mean, it happened so early. It was like 4-2 or something before the first media timeout, so...
Yeah.
It's really hard to say what would have happened. The other ones, we saw what happened with the game first, and when a player gets removed that late, it could be a little easier to guess what would happen. But Fletcher Loyer has a nice game for Purdue, but that's 4 losses in a row for the Boilers, Joe. They just haven't. I don't think they've been horrible for entire games. They just really have had bad lulls offensively. They lose a close one at Crisler. They lose at home to Wisconsin. They lose at Breslin. These aren't terrible losses, but they haven't been playing very well, and when you play good teams, you're going to lose.
Yeah, Sean, and, you kind of look at teams in the conference that are cold right now. You thought it was Oregon. It's probably Purdue right now. I mean, Ohio State's an easy candidate who we'll probably talk about either in the question segment or the segment after this, but I don't see them answering many doubts. You play UCLA at home on Friday after this 5-day layoff. I don't think it's like the most must-win game of the year, but probably for your psyche it is.
Yeah, because then you get Rutgers up next at home, and while Rutgers has been good at backing you over the years, you think, all right, if we can get UCLA, then we can get Rutgers and get to 13 wins and see what happens at Illinois. But Joe, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so lot to figure out for Purdue. I do think Matt Painter's been in these situations before. Not that he likes being in them, but no, I can't really comment more on that. I think the L4 that you're going to see in their column is not very good.
Yeah, and we've talked about them needing something outside of the big three. They didn't even have that today. Kaufman read 9 points, 4 rebounds, and Braden Smith 8 points, 5 assists, and 6 turnovers. Lawyer did have a nice game with 20. As I said, a lot of that was late. I think he probably had 8 or 10 of those in the last 4 minutes. I actually got a little bit of a contribution from Miles Colvin. He had 11 off the bench. Cam Heide had 5. If that sort of is the key. They don't have a ton of depth, and they need sort of everyone to play well at the top if they're going to reach their ceiling. And it's been a couple games now where they haven't. But you get UCLA, who just has 2 wins in the Eastern Time Zone now. They had 0 last week, but it seems like, again, it's not like they're totally getting destroyed. It's just they're not doing little things right. They're giving up too many easy baskets. They're not shooting great from the field. They're making some threes, but it's not really one thing that you could point to for Purdue, which is why I think it is a little more concerning than national people would want to admit.
Absolutely, Sean. I think getting off, before we get to the questions segment, I do want to touch on Ohio State here, who was a team we called out. After the Michigan game, this was our last episode, we weren't too concerned about the Buckeyes. They ultimately, I thought, played a really good game. Clearly some lapses down low, got in too much foul trouble, particularly as Sean Stewart, and then got engulfed down low between Wolf and Golden. But there was a clear cause to that. But what happened on Thursday night, that's the kind of loss that completely takes a team's NCAA tournament hopes in any traditional year where the bubble isn't so weak like this year. Sean's covered both on our Big Ten and national podcast, and frankly in his bracketology, even if you don't listen to these podcasts much, you just follow us on Instagram or TikTok. So I don't know what's wrong with the Buckeyes. Truly, they've done a really good job responding most of the year. Jake Diebler even said that after the Michigan game. The last 2 performances have been pretty lifeless offensively. Horrible shooting the 3. Even a Bruce Thornton's really struggled. And then not getting contributions from guys like a Micah Parrish or a John Mobley Jr., even a Devin Royal. You're clearly seeing that the departure of Michi Johnson and, frankly, their lack of depth down low between a Stewart and a Bradshaw, it's finally caught up to them. And the Buckeyes are in a really, really tough position right now, Sean.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see where they end up at the next projection. A bunch of national people today, where's Indiana after their win? And without really doing it, they guessed, probably maybe first team out, last team in, second team out. If Ohio State gets dragged into the same sort of tier as Indiana, the Hoosiers did go there on the road and win, and they play again at Assembly Hall. Like, Indiana has a chance to sweep the Buckeyes, which will 100% put them above them in the bubble talk. So, again, it's not been a great weekend for the bubble. As you've said, Joe, the bubble stinks. A couple bid stealers could make it better. Last year's bubble was actually pretty good, and we had the 3 bid stealers, so I don't think it's very fair to compare resumes to previous years, whether they made it or not, because, again, there were 3 less spots last year than there usually is, and it was a better bubble. But Ohio State is going to test this theory. They're 15-13 right now. They've got USC on the road, Nebraska at home, and then Indiana on the road. So, again, they got to go 2-1 to get 3 games over, and then they got to win. They got to go 3-2 essentially in their next 5 to get 3 games over. And it appears, Joe, that might be the number that they need to get in.
Yeah, Sean, and USC. Obviously losing tonight to Rutgers. This is a team that's been pretty good at home. They've beaten some pretty good they beat the conference leader right now at Michigan State at home. A team that's clicked at times, winning at Illinois, winning at Nebraska. And, Sean, USC's a talented enough team.
And Desmond Claude's back, too.
Yeah, and a team that could score at will. That's what we thought Ohio State was. They need to get back to that identity and quickly, because I think if they lose that USC game, they got to win their last 2 games. And against the tournament team like Nebraska and at Assembly Hall, where they're most definitely going to need a win on Senior Day, there's no way you want to be in that position where you have to must-win both of those. So,
yeah, it's concerning. They just to lose by 20+ to this Northwestern team at home. Give them a lot of credit, but they're down their 2 best. They're not a tournament team to begin with, and they're down their 2 best players. That certainly can't happen. Now, Bradshaw has missed the last 2 games, which of course has hurt with their interior defense, but Joe, I don't think that was really the problem today. They hold UCLA to 15 of 37 on 2-pointers. They hold them under 70. Like, they had a chance to win today's game. And just 49 against Northwestern and then 61 against UCLA. You are going to need more points than that to win in the Big Ten. And, you don't have Bruce Thornton, or you don't have Bradshaw in there. Sean Stewart gives you just 2 points today. Their front line is very thin, and it just seems like any sort of good forward on the other team is going to have a pretty good game. Daly had 20 in this one, and you go back to the Northwestern game, and Northwestern gets 70. Nick Martinelli has a nice game. Nicholson gets 10. He never gets 10. So it seems like if you have a good sort of forward, you're probably going to score a lot of points against Ohio State.
Absolutely, Sean. If nothing else on this segment, I do want to get to questions because after this weekend, there are a lot with the conference race and bracketology.
Yeah, we had we can do questions, and then we could preview a couple of the big games coming up before our next podcast. But Joe, while you load up the questions, let me just get the bracket matrix up. It's been too long since I've done my bracketology. It wouldn't be any point in showing that. A lot has changed since then. And again, the matrix thing has changed too, but it's a little bit more accurate. So we'll throw this one up there.
While Sean's doing that, guys, we will preview 2 games that are critical to the title race, both Michigan at Nebraska on Monday night, where Michigan's a half-point dog on the road, and then Michigan State at Maryland, which if I'm going to guesstimate might be either a pick-em or a Maryland by like 1.5, just being the home team. But Sean, is that bracket matrix all ready to go?
Let me just load this up and see if that works. All right, yeah, we're good.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, our first question is from Harry, who just has a Boston Celtics icon, so don't really know who's what horse he has in this race. Maybe he has none. Just curious. Sean, given this weekend, which team would you rather be in the bubble conversation, Ohio State or Indiana?
And that's a good question. I think Ohio State probably has a better resume right now, but you'd have to think Indiana is going to play better down the stretch. They do play at Indiana. Unless something changes, Indiana's probably winning that game. So I think Ohio State will be ranked ahead of Indiana in this next projection. But I'd rather be Indiana in terms of their good wins. We talk bubble. The quad one records of the bubble teams are awful. And Indiana's at 4-11 right now with 2 quad 1A wins. You have the likes of North Carolina, Xavier on the bubble. They have 1 and 2 quad 1 wins. Again, I'd have to look at Ohio State's. I don't know off the top of my head because they haven't really been in the bubble talk. They have more than 2 quad 1 wins. So, I think the chances that they make the tournament are probably a little higher for Indiana, but Ohio State will be ranked higher as of now.
Excellent. This is from Daniel, who's a Kansas Jayhawk fan, but this...
tough couple days for him.
Yeah, this does apply. I hope he's also not an Illinois fan, which factors into the next question. Given preseason expectations and the fact Kansas was a top 5 team for most of the preseason and beginning of the year, between Illinois, Kansas, and I think he means Purdue, or definitely not, maybe Indiana, which of the 3 have been most disappointing? I'm going to say between Illinois and Kansas. Let's just do that.
Yeah, so Kansas is a 6 seed on the matrix right now, and you see a couple of 7s there in the most recent projection. And we've talked about what they kind of went through this last year, and they're like, all right, we're happy the season's over. We're just going to go again with a different group of players. That sort of happened. And we'd have to go back and look, Joe, what we really said preseason for Illinois. I think we said it could work. There's a lot of question marks. Maybe from a preseason point of view, when we didn't really know what Illinois would be, Kansas is more disappointing. But being that the heights that Illinois has hit and the lows, I think you have to go with the Fighting Illini. A victim of their own success a little bit early on, but Kansas is still going to be a pretty good seed in one of their worst years ever. And Illinois is, we are starting to see some Illini fans question Brad Underwood, which probably not right. In all honesty, but some of the questions deserve to be asked.
Absolutely. Oh, this one's a good one from Brian, who was our Purdue fan who asked the question last week. And Sean's answer, to be clear, I'm not going to directly quote him, but it was pretty much Purdue would really have to mess up to not be a protected seed. So, Sean, Purdue having now lost four straight in the complete, not going to say that word, of a performance against Indiana today, are they in danger of dropping out of the top 16?
Not as of now. You'd have to project down the line. They'll be in the four range probably. Next projection, if you they are the third three seed on the matrix right here, but you see a couple fours in there with projections done today or yesterday. Um, and you just have to look below them, right? Michigan, top four seed, they didn't win. Arizona, second four seed, they didn't win. Texas Tech, third four seed. I'd have to look real quick. Don't know off the top of my head what they did. Um, Texas Tech, they won by a lot against West Virginia, so potentially they could take that spot. St. John's, nice win against UConn. Missouri lost against Arkansas. Again, these teams, there's still a little bit of separation for Purdue. They're probably on the four line right now, but need to end that losing streak quick.
Yeah, and conversely, two-part question from Noah. First one's a yes, no. Second one is a hypothetical, and I hope most of you are listening to this before the Michigan-Nebraska game. Sean, given Michigan's performance against Michigan State and the fact they only played one game, are they in danger of dropping from perhaps a three seed to an unprotected seed? And if they lose to Nebraska, is this a major point of concern for the Wolverines?
It's probably not. Um, I don't think they've really played badly. They've won. They don't have bad losses. I'd have to look at where their numbers line up. I still think they're in the top 20 or near 20 in Ken Palm. But no, I mean, Nebraska's a tournament team on the road. You'd have to think that the spread will be pretty close. I don't know if it's out
It's half
yet.
a point right now
Yeah, so
in favor of Nebraska.
yeah, so it's essentially a coin toss game. You're not getting penalized for that much, but maybe here if a couple of these 5 seeds and 6 seeds win and pick up big wins and Michigan loses, not a bad loss. Can't really punish them for that, but yeah, I could see them on the 5 seed. Actually, they play Monday and Thursday. I'm probably only going to get one projection in. I still think they're probably a 4 with a loss against Nebraska. If they do lose to Rutgers, potentially they go there after. But no, I don't see them dropping off that with a loss to Nebraska, unless it's like a 25, 30-point loss.
Excellent. Final question from Patrick, who had a heck of a weekend being a Michigan State fan. Um, do you think Michigan State has a clear path to the title aside from, I mean, obviously, if they win out or even win 4 or 5, they definitely get I mean, sorry, 3 or 4, they definitely get a split. Um, even though they have the most challenging stretch between Michigan and Michigan State. And I would agree at Maryland. I think it's going to be a really tough game, which we're going to preview. Home against Wisconsin, at Iowa, and then concluding the year home against Michigan. So, Sean, actually, let's just preview these games to answer his question.
Well, why don't you answer that too? I think probably 60% chance they win at least a share. They got tough games, but if you give them a block of tough games, they're going to win some of them.
Mm-hmm.
So if they go 2-2, for example, one of them's a win against Michigan, that's enough to beat them.
Yeah.
So I think they're probably going to win the league.
Yeah, I
think they'd have to lose to Michigan on the last day and then lose another one for a share.
Yeah. I don't think Michigan wins out, to be very clear. I think there's a real chance they lose tomorrow at Nebraska. I think there's a real chance Illinois or Maryland could get them at home, and then at the Breslin's not a game I'm going to bank on Michigan winning either. So I do think Michigan State's best interest is to probably go at least split Maryland and Wisconsin, because I will give them the benefit of the doubt over both Iowa on the road and senior day at the Breslin. But Sean, if nothing else on this question, I do want to preview these 2 games.
Well, I do want to ask one to you, sure. Joe. What is the goal for Michigan here is to just make that last game matter, right? To have the title potentially up in the air. Maybe Michigan State's already won a share, but Michigan can get a share with a win. I don't really see a way that Michigan can win the outright title now. They'd have to beat Michigan State and outplay them in their other games. I think the goal for Michigan should be to go into that game with a chance for at least a share.
This might sound naive, Sean. I think Michigan's realistic shot is to probably win their the 4 games in between the game at the Breslins. So at Nebraska, and then you have 3 straight home games against Rutgers, who's really struggled, always dangerous but really struggled. Illinois, kind of the same deal there. Maryland, who's not been invincible on the road, they've played really close on the road, and then at the Breslin. I think Michigan's most realistic shot to get at least a share is to probably win 4 or 5, and that's really challenging. But if I'm going to pick the 4 or 5 they're going to win, Sean, it has to be these next 4. I think.
So you're saying,
Michigan,
that it should be flipped. That Michigan State needs to win for at least a share of that game. You don't think Michigan can do that?
yes, in this situation, I
Okay.
think Michigan State probably has at least a share of the title at hand. But my goal as a Michigan fan is to be at
Yeah.
3 losses going into that game for Michigan State to be at 4 or 5. Because if it comes to Michigan doesn't win, at least if they go into that game needing to win for a share, I'm not banking on that.
Yeah.
I would rather them have at least a share wrapped up, if not the outright. And the only way that would happen, it's simple math, guys.
Yeah, Michigan State would
is-
have to lose one before then, and Michigan can't.
Yeah, and or perhaps Michigan loses 1, Michigan State loses 2, which is a possibility. I think that Iowa game might be a little more challenging than people might give it credit for, but certainly Maryland and Wisconsin are not teams they're going to take lightly.
But, all right, Joe, just one thing for the standings before we get into what's next. I did put the lines up there. Top 4 get double buys. 5 through 9 get the single bye. The 10 does not get a single bye anymore. There's 3 games on Wednesday now, so Indiana in the 10th spot there, down to Iowa. Indiana-Iowa would be the 10-15 game right now. So, you're a bubble team, you're usually thinking to get to that 10 seed, you don't have to play Wednesday. It's actually the 9 seed now, and we have made it very clear over the years how much fun the 8-9 game is on Thursday. So if you really don't want any of that, get to the 7, and that's where Illinois is right now. But that is just something to look out for. We do have the Big Ten relegation zone, teams that will not be going to the tournament. That's Northwestern, Penn State, and Washington as of now. There's 3 teams at 6 and 10. Maybe one of those teams gets sucked into the relegation battle, but we're starting to see who's going to be playing what day in Indianapolis.
Absolutely, Sean. I guess without further ado, let's preview the 2 games during the week for the top 2 teams in the Big Ten, Michigan being a half game back of State, although with the game in hand. Michigan goes to Nebraska, a team that's coming off a really disappointing loss to last place Penn State on the road, or second to last place Penn State, depending on the day. Losing by 17, really uncharacteristic performance from the Huskers, who I thought kind of turned a corner of late, not saying all the works for naught. But Jawan Gary, 1 of 7 from the field, 6 points. Bryce Williams, frankly, Sean, Connor Seaton was great off the bench, but for them to win, they need both Bryce and Jawan going, especially on the road, and I think that's what's going to take to beat Michigan as well. So, I think Nebraska being the home team, I see why they're the slight favorite. I will say that to beat Michigan, you're going to have to take away Area 51, something Michigan State did a really good job of. And I think kind of replicating that game plan is going to be in their best interest, although they had short prep Michigan between this. So perhaps Michigan continues their coldness on offense, and Nebraska might not even have to play that crazy a game to win.
The way Fred Hoiberg has attacked 2 big lineups is a little bit gimmicky. I know over the years from Indiana, he might throw a couple of total curveballs at Michigan here, like some pre-catch doubles, or fronting the post and then having basically the helper already in this position before the ball even goes there. But I think Hoiberg might try a couple tricks up his sleeve for how to defend Wolf and Golden, because I don't really think we've seen a team do it well for 40 minutes. There's been some stretches where they've been successful, but I don't think a team has ever really won the game because of how they've done that. They've had good plays elsewhere. Michigan State had some great guards. I guess they made them work at Michigan. They still got their stats, but that is something to look out for Michigan, to me, is what is Nebraska going to do to try and stop it? And I think it's going to be something that is totally out of the ordinary.
Yeah. Michigan, the key to victory is simple. They have to space the floor a lot better. You do hope Sam Walters is back, dealing with some back and family issues. You do hope that one of the guards shows up aside from Damari Burnett, whether that's Trey Donaldson, Roddy Gale, who had some absolutely horrible turnovers on Friday night, and then hopefully a better game from Danny Wolf where he's not the center of attention and was playing gassed on defense. So this is a really hard game to make a prediction on, Sean. I am going to roll with the Huskers. I'm not necessarily thinking it's a huge concern for Michigan. I just think only 2 days of rest after emotional game where Go Green, Go White took over the stadium. I do think the Huskers win a close one. I think the difference will be Connor Essegian off the bench. I do think he has a really good game against his hometown team, or home state team, I should say. And I think the Huskers get another quad one win, and Michigan further deflates himself in the title race, the same way Purdue and Wisconsin have done. And by the way, I was 2 for 2 last week on rivalry picks. Picked your Hoosiers, who you picked against, and I picked against my Wolverines. Was 2 for 2.
We both picked against our teams and for our other person's teams, and I was 0 for, and you were 2 for 2. Joe, I'm going to keep that same policy. I think Michigan win the game here. Nebraska's offense is very isolation-oriented. If you have good principles defensively, they could cause some issues. And then the way that you beat Nebraska's defense is with, crisp passing one-on-one plays. I think Michigan can at least do the second part of that. It's very much like an NBA game. Hoiberg looks for matchups, abuses them until you switch, and then finds another one. But I think Michigan is not it's not the way to beat them. I think you need sort of a team effort than one-on-one defense. I think Wolf, if they try and one-on-one Wolf, it won't work. They won't. But I think Michigan just gets the job done here. It really stinks for the Wolverines that Nebraska lost their game coming into this one. This is one for Nebraska where they probably clinched their at-large bid with a win here. I don't think they're quite safe yet, 17-10. If they lose 3-4 in a row, maybe not. But this is a great opportunity for them to get away from the bubble. Michigan obviously still got a banner to play for. I think Michigan gets the job done slightly here. It's going to be a good one, though. It really could go either way. All right, Joe, let's go to Wednesday. Michigan State on the road at Maryland. Michigan fans will certainly be rooting for the Terps to get the job done, but still, they're only 2 games back. They win, maybe they're in the title conversation, but Michigan State, 3 really good wins in a row. Maryland 21-6 have been really good at home. Not much separating the 2 teams in this one.
Yeah, Sean, I think, Derek Queen's going to be the most important player of this game. I think he could absolutely not abuse anyone down low. Certainly not going to use that terminology.
I think he could.
I think, he has to be at least a presence. I do believe in Maryland's secondary options, especially because one in Julian Reese has been their number one options in plenty of times there, and Jacoby Gillespie. I do think those big 3 are better suited in a home game against Michigan State than perhaps Michigan's big 3, which, there's an argument on who that third option on Michigan is after Wolf and Golden. So I do think the Terps, the ESPN matchup predictor, ESPN Analytics has it at a 61 to 39% chance that Maryland does win. So I think that's significant. Maryland's done a really good job defending home court this year. In fact, just looking at their numbers here, they're 16-1 at home. I think the lone loss
Marquette
was
early in the year,
but undefeated in the Big Ten at home, something they were in Kevin Willard's first year. I do think this is going to be a really, really good game, a really close game. It's going to come down to if Michigan State can hit the open shots the way they did at Michigan. Can they get a repeat performance from Jace Richardson? Can Jaden Akins step up again, which he's done a lot in his Spartan career? I don't think he's gotten enough credit for that. And can their bigs frustrate Derek Queen enough to lead the Spartans to large? I think this is their hardest remaining game of the season, in the regular season at least. This would be a massive step for the Spartans if they won this game. But before I pick Sean, what are your thoughts?
I think that Queen is going to have a bunch of points and rebounds. Michigan State has not done well against really good post players, and Queen is a little bit more mobile than a regular one. For me, it's going to come down to, can Michigan State make Maryland's lack of depth matter? Maryland as good as they've been playing, they get single-digit bench points every game. They rely on their 5 starters to take them all the way, pretty much, and that's worked for the most part. Michigan State has probably the best 1 through 10 in the league, certainly from what I can tell here. But can they make that matter? Can they make Maryland go to maybe 1 or 2 of their non-starters for extended periods? Can you get them in foul trouble? That's really what the difference is going to be for me. I think Queen will definitely get 20 and 10 if he doesn't get hurt or in foul trouble. But can Michigan State make their depth matter? Especially their guard depth, because they did it against Michigan. They had 4 good guard performances to 1. Again, if you get 2-1 or 3-2 good guard performances, I think Michigan State could get the job done here. But Joe, I'm not picking against Maryland at home. They just seem to, they've been good enough on the road this year to be really up there in the rankings and in the seeding lines for the NCAA tournament, but just haven't. I know Michigan State's won a couple really nice road games here recently at Illinois and Michigan, but can't pick against Maryland at home unless they're playing Duke or Auburn.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Maryland as well. I do think this is a bitterly close game. I think it's probably going to come down to the last possession. I do think the difference is I trust Maryland's secondary options a lot more than I trust probably any team's secondary options based on what I've seen.
They have 5 good performances a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do trust Kevin Willard will defend home court. And perhaps if Michigan loses and Michigan State loses, this title race gets a little more interesting. And Sean, if we've known anything since MSU's road trip to LA, this is an MSU comment, more so a general conference race breakdown. It's been anything but one team leading for more than anywhere from 12 hours to a week. So really interesting game. I think the Spartans definitely have a pathway to victory. I don't think it's a 61% probability Maryland wins. I think it's more like 52 to 53% chance.
And Maryland definitely needs both of the games that we just talked about to go their way for a chance here. They got to pick up a game. Obviously, if they beat Michigan State, they'll pick up a game on them. But they need to pick up a game against Michigan, too. That would happen with a Nebraska win and a Maryland win. But, Joe, Maryland has been playing a lot of blowouts recently at home. They beat USC by 17, Iowa by 26. They won at Nebraska. They beat Rutgers at home. They have an 8 and a 9-point win in there. Again, I didn't watch those. I don't know how close those actually were, but I don't think Michigan State will get blown out. And you have to like the Spartans' chances in a close game. They don't turn it over. They make free throws. So, again, I think this is a true coin flip with maybe a 1 or 2% edge towards Maryland. But, yeah, like you said, weirder things have happened. We've had Oregon win at the Kohl Center. We had Indiana win at the Breslin. We had Michigan State go 0 for 2 in L.A., and I just mentioned their 3 losses. They've won every other game in the Big Ten this year. So weirder things have happened. But what's for sure is Maryland needs this and Nebraska win to have a chance at the Big Ten title.
Yep. Sean, that's probably all my thoughts I have. I know we kept you viewers and listeners on a little longer than expected, but I think it's justified due to the ramifications of these last 2 weeks of the regular season. Hard to think about.
Potentially with some good games this weekend, Joe. We might be back later. Please be sure to check out all of our content here on the YouTube channel. We've got In a Nutshell. We've got our college football recaps and previews. We have got the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast, and we do have the Sports Daily Trivia League coming soon. So please like and subscribe. Please check out our other videos if you haven't already, and we'll see you next time.